In conversation with Michael W. Thomas, Michael Thomas has published nine collections of poetry, three novels, and two collections of short fiction. His latest poetry collection are Under Smoky Light and A Time for Such a World. His latest fiction titles are Sinkhole, Stout Cortez, Novellas and Stories, and The Erkeley Shadows, a novel, Swan Village Reporter. With Simon Fletcher's editor, The Poetry of Worcestershire, his works has appeared in the Antigonish Review Canada, the Antioch Review United States, Critical Survey, Crossroads Poland, Dream Culture, Etchings Australia, Irish Studies Review, Irish University Review, Magazine 6 United States, Pennine Platform, Poetry Salzburg Review, The Times Literary Supplement, and Other the Radar, among others. He has reviewed for the International Journal of Welsh Writing in English, the London Magazine, Other Poetry, and the Times Literary Supplement, and is on the editorial board of Crossroads, a journal of English Studies, University of Bartok, Poland. It was longlisted for the National Poetry Competition 2020 and 2022, and also longlisted and shortlisted for the Indigo Dream Spring Poetry Prize 2023. Visit Michael's website at www.michaelwthomas.co.uk to find out more about his works. And on today's
Thank you.
episode of Photo Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to offer the show today, Michael Thomas. How are you
Hello.
doing, Michael?
Fine, thank you. How are you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm doing very fine too. It's lovely
Good.
to have you on the show today. You have such an amazing bio.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Michael, I like that you have explored and written in several different genres of literature. I mean, from writing short stories, you've explored to novels, you've moved to poetry and other genres as well. Now, could you tell us a bit about your writing career in general? When did you started writing, and how did you find yourself writing, exploring different genre? What would you say are the key difference also between writing prose and writing poetry? Yeah, I don't know if you'd love to talk
Um,
about that. That's a trunkload of question I've got there.
sure. Yes. Well, I started writing when I was a teenager, and we had to study particular books in school. But I found myself
Yeah.
reading beyond the particular poems or stories that we had to study. And I found myself being drawn to language in ways other than the kind of language we use in everyday use. We're used to living in a world where language is used for guidance, for
Yeah.
information, all of the signs that surround us: keep left, no admittance, no more than eight people in this elevator, go to
Mm,
the checkout, turn right, and so on. So we're
absolutely.
very familiar with that kind of language,
Yeah.
but I found myself fascinated by what literary language could do: paint a
Mm,
scene, offer memorable characters, capture a mood. So to begin with, I wrote short stories,
yeah.
and then I tried my hand at poems before moving on to novels. Um, so I still write in all of those genres. I don't
Yeah.
think I have a particular favorite. I suppose it's a question of the best genre to use for whatever it is I'm trying to say. So if I'm trying to capture a moment and pin
Mm,
down a particular feeling,
yeah.
uh, poetry seems the best vehicle. But if I'm trying to explore character and episodes, fiction seems best. But of
Yeah.
course, there can be a crossover between the two. You can
Mm,
have descriptive poems, poems that tell a story, and
absolutely.
you can also have prose, which has poetic images and effects. So I still move between the genres. I don't think I have a favorite. it depends on what I'm trying to achieve at a particular time.
Time. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's quite amazing, really. I love your amazing, deep response to this, really. I love your take
All
on
right.
that. And to me,
Thank
following
you.
on from your answer to that, I love to ask you, what would you say are the key differences between writing prose and writing poetry? Yeah, do you have one that is your favorite over another?
I suppose with writing prose,
Yeah.
you are looking to explore things in detail over a
Mm,
number of pages,
yeah.
what characters are like, what makes them tick, what makes them do what they do, the episodes and scenes that they get involved in.
Yeah.
Whereas poetry, you're perhaps zeroing in on a particular mood, a
Mm,
particular feeling that you're trying to capture at any particular time. So
yeah.
sometimes I'm in the mood for exploring character and motive
Yeah.
and setting. So that's when prose becomes most relevant. Sometimes I'm trying to explore a particular moment, capture a
Mm,
particular mood. So that's
mm.
when, say, a short poem might be more appropriate. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
your take on this, really. Thank you for mentioning.
You're
Thank you for
you're
mentioning.
welcome.
Yeah. Now let's talk about your crime thriller novel and the name
Oh
of The
yes,
Erkeley Shadow. I'd love to ask
yes.
you, how does it come about? What inspired you to write The Erkeley Shadow? And also, how great a part does the past play in your work? How great a part does the past play in your work? Would you like to talk about
Oh,
that too?
sure, yes. Well, the Erkeley Shadows actually started life as a short story. There
Mm.
was a there used to be a competition in the UK run by
Oh,
Stand Magazine, the
wow.
international fiction competition, and the story, which was called at the time "Taking Pete Wisnok Out," was a
Mm.
finalist in the competition one year, and
Oh.
I went on to write other things, but I kept coming back to the story because I thought it had the potential to be developed. So from there, it grew
Mm.
into a novella, a very short novel. But it was a bit lopsided. I had two main characters, but I only had one character that I'd really
Mm.
developed, Jonathan Parry. The other character wasn't really very developed at all. So I showed the novella to some people, and one person said, well, either remove the second character and
Yeah.
just have it focused on Jonathan Parry, or
Oh.
develop the other character um, to the same extent as Jonathan, um, so that the
Mm.
second character, Will Apland, had equal importance with Jonathan.
Wow.
So that's what I did. And that's when it grew from a novella into a novel. Um,
Wow.
and I suppose its main theme is rather like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Um,
Mm.
Jonathan Jonathan Parry does something as a teenager for which he should atone, something to which he should confess. But
Mm.
instead, he seeks to escape punishment, literally escape. He and his family emigrate from the UK to Canada. But
Mm.
what he has done is never far behind. You could say it crosses the Atlantic with him. Um,
Oh.
so I was fascinated by that idea that what someone does in the past can't be just
Mm.
consigned to the past. It can haunt someone, it can come after them, and there comes a point where they have to face it and they have to atone for what they've done. Um,
Mm.
so that was one part of the theme, but the other part of the theme was how the other main character, Will Apland, is affected by Jonathan's story. he never meets Jonathan, but he comes to know his story. And as he
Mm.
reads through Jonathan's story, he finds parallels between Jonathan's history and his own history. So the novel is about Jonathan's experiences, but also about the profound effect that those experiences have on Will and how they potentially change him from a good character to something else entirely. So I suppose
Oh,
that's all tied up with the idea of the past,
yeah,
how the past can be. I mean, we think, oh, well, we do something, it
yeah.
happened a long time ago,
Go.
we can leave it in its box. But the past can sometimes burst out and come
Yeah,
back into the present.
it can
Someone
resurface.
or something
Yeah,
returns to our present, and we have to
absolutely.
deal with it in the present. So
Mm.
that was the importance of the past as far as
Yeah,
the novel was concerned, that it's not, the past isn't static. It can suddenly come back and
yeah.
color and take over your present life completely.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love this
Yes.
actually. The
Yeah.
past can just resurface one day and,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and interfere with the current happenings of the present. Yeah, so
Yes.
that's quite
Yes.
very
Yes.
true. Thank you for
Yes.
mentioning that. That's quite beautiful and
Thank
thought-provoking
you.
as well.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're
And
welcome. Yeah.
if you have a copy of the book, could you show
Yes,
it to
I
the
do.
camera just so we can see what it
Yes.
looks like? Beautiful
There it
enough,
is.
imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Erkeley
There it
Shadows.
is.
Thank you. Thank you for
You're
sharing.
welcome. Yeah,
Now, could you
you're
tell
welcome.
us about your poetry collection, Under Smoky Light? For readers who haven't read it yet and without giving much information away, could we have
Yeah.
a sneak of what we'd expect picking up Under Smoky Light?
Thank you. Yes, certainly. Well, it's published in the UK by Offa's Press. That's
Mm,
OFFA apostrophe S, Offa's Press. And the collection has a number of different themes. Um, the experience of getting older, the fates of particular characters at
mm,
certain times in history, and
yeah.
also the kind of relationship that a person might have with their family.
Mm.
Um, and if you like, I could read one of the short poems to give
That
you
would
a
be
flavor
great.
of it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Um, this poem is called Impresario, and it's a poem about my father. I mention a few place names in Britain.
Oh,
Um, they include Sedgley, Bloxwich, and Wood Setton, which are areas near where I grew up in the West Midlands of England.
oh,
Um, I mention Aintree and Kempton Park, which are racecourses in England.
mm,
And I mention Llanelli, which is in South Wales, which is where my father came from. So just
oh,
to give you a context. So I'll
yeah,
just read it for you if you like.
yeah, let's do it.
Impresario. Impresario, summer 1969. If I think of my father now, I see a figure sitting on an oil drum at the end of the garden, his coat spread over his shoulders in the late evening sun, like an impresario who's just been told that his first night might be his last, or
Wow.
a tipster warned
Mm,
away from Aintree or Kempton Park. His chin on his hand, he stares at the ground where he began, though elsewhere, the Llanelli mines, for all of half a day in family lore, after which he upped and resolved to discover Xanadu, which is always one hill beyond, and anyway, at last dissolved into Sedgley, Bloxwich, Wood Setton, none of them presuming to be the prize for tonight, or
mm,
even the passing moment. Follow that dream, sang Elvis Presley in a pub where Dad once bought me a Vimto and parked me in a room where the
mm,
TV didn't work. Each day of his foreshortened life, his dream minced and gurned and blew raspberries. So leave him then on the oil drum as the sun turns for other lands. Shopyard grease on his palms and on his cuffs. Xanadu still in his eyes.
mm.
Thank you.
This is
Thank
beautiful,
you.
actually. It feels to me like narrative poetry. I mean, poetry that
Yes.
talks story, because I have written also in the theme of narrative poetry where I have poems like telling story and it keeps going on and on and on. So that reads
Yes.
to me like narrative poetry. Is it narrative poetry?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Oh,
It's recalling a particular moment.
oh,
I suppose you might almost say it's like a diary entry, something recollected in quite a few words, quite
mm,
short, but I hope trying to give a sense of a
mm,
particular moment and the character, the image of my father sitting on the oil drum in the garden. So it does have a strong narrative element to it. Yes,
wow.
yes, yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing, really. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for
Um,
sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, there are other themes in the collection. Other poems capture other moments. There's a poem about a small boy watching his family as they
Mm,
leave the beach and go back to their car at the very end of a vacation. There's a poem about a girl looking out of her window at night, waiting in vain to see the moon, and
mm,
also a poem about someone reflecting upon the end of their latest relationship.
mm.
And as I said, a number of the poems are about getting older, but they're not pessimistic. I don't think they're pessimistic. I've tried in the poems to reflect thoughtfully on getting
Yeah.
older as an inescapable fact of life. And
Mm.
here's there's the
The
book
book,
Under
yeah.
Smoky Light. Yeah.
I love the cover.
Uh,
The
yeah,
moon
it's
right
very well
there.
done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
simple as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, it is. It
Yeah, I
is.
love
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
You're
sharing,
welcome.
Michael. All of this
You're
sounds, I
welcome.
love your answers to these questions, really. It sounds quite deep and very thoughtful to me. Yeah. So
Well,
thank you for mentioning.
well, thank you for sending the questions. I mean, they've given me a lot to think about and a lot to get stuck
Absolutely.
into. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
yeah. Now let's talk about inspirations and ideas, which to me is
Sure.
one of those amazing things that surprises me with storytellers.
Yes.
I've always been
Yes.
surprised about how novelists, especially writers, especially novelists like yourself, craft long
Yes.
sentences, craft paragraph that makes pages, that makes chapters, and an eventual novel eventually.
Yeah.
And this always leave me. How did they get the idea to write these things? Where did these words come from? I mean, this is a trunkload of words joined together in an amazing way,
Yes.
and a story is being told eventually. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I'd love to ask you to Michael, how do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where did they come from?
Um, well, I've found that they can come from any quarter.
Hmm.
There's a very good English poet from the last century, Stevie Smith, who's a very good example of that. A lot of her poems include subjects that at face value don't seem poetic at all. And
Oh,
in my poetry and in my fiction, I've had similar experiences. I might see a
wow.
particular scene, I might hear a snippet of conversation, and they
Yeah.
might not make a great impression on me at the time.
Hmm.
But later on, I might be thinking of something else entirely. And I find that that scene or that snippet of conversation come back to me, presenting themselves as something worth reflecting on and developing. So
Hmm.
sometimes inspiration can come from overhearing what someone says, reading a line in a newspaper report,
Mm,
perhaps seeing a particular scene on the street, and that can lodge itself in your mind and just stay
mm,
there percolating until it comes back in sharper focus and you can start developing it. Sometimes I set out deliberately to write on a particular subject. One of my other novels, it isn't published yet, I hope it will be at a
yeah.
future date, um, is about a man from Grenada and his experience of living in England for a while. It's called
Mm,
Nowherean, which is a Grenadian term for a person of no fixed abode. So, with that,
mm,
I definitely wanted to capture as best I could what he felt about living in a culture that was so different from his home culture. So, with that
yeah.
piece of writing, I had a definite aim in mind before I began. So, sometimes I have a definite aim and say, yes, I want to write about this. It's clear in my mind. And other
Mm,
times it can just come, things can just float into your mind and just stay there. And you don't pay them much attention. But then maybe later on, something happens and they come back to your mind vividly, and you think, I could develop this. So that's my experience of inspiration anyway, so far. Yes,
mm.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
This is amazing, really. I love hearing to
yeah,
know about how your inspirations and ideas come from. Thank you for
yes.
sharing.
You're welcome. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And now, Micah, as a novelist and as a poet, I would like to ask you, which one comes to you easily? Which of this genre do you have the easiest time putting down or writing compared to the other? And also, in your own term, how would
Um,
you define poetry? What does poetry mean to you? I've got two questions in there already.
I don't think I find one genre easier than others. It is more to do with the individual piece of writing.
Mm,
A certain poem might develop fairly smoothly, but another poem might be very challenging to write. So you have to
mm,
draft and redraft it. And I sometimes find that I have to put uh, poems on one side. I think a lot of poets find this. They work on a poem, it's rather challenging. They can't seem to capture exactly what it is they're trying to write.
yeah,
So they have to put it on one side and then come back to it
later.
later on. And it's the same with fiction. Um, Parts of a piece of fiction might seem to flow easily,
Yeah.
but other parts, and you think, oh, this is going really well, it's rolling along really well. But then you might come to another part that seems to defy your attempts to shape it in the way you think it should be shaped.
Mm,
Now, as for how I would define poetry, defining poetry, that is a interesting, a very challenging question. I
yeah.
think that the debate about what poetry really is has been going on ever since people started writing it.
Yeah.
And for me, poetry is about trying to record and capture a particular moment or mood and trying to make it um, as memorable as I can, trying to
Mm,
make the way I capture a moment and capture a mood as memorable as I can. It sometimes feels like trying to
mm,
chase a butterfly with a net. You think you've
mm,
got it, you think you've got it captured, and then it gets away from you, and you
yeah.
have to work at it and redraft till you get it. So if I feel one of my poems has worked to some extent, I think it's because I've managed to some degree to capture the mood or to capture the moment, whatever
Mm,
it is I'm trying to talk about.
yeah.
But moods and moments are brief, fleeting things. You might
Mm,
write a poem about something on Monday and feel that it's reasonably successful, but you might try and write about the same thing on a Tuesday and
yeah.
find that what you're trying to say just won't translate to the page. So
Absolutely.
that's where the whole business of drafting and redrafting comes in. I've
Mm,
always liked the quote from the English poet W.H. Auden. He said, "There is no such thing as a finished poem, just poems in various stages of abandonment." So, what he
mm.
meant was that it
Wow.
can seem difficult, even impossible, to capture a subject exactly as we want to capture it. But we keep trying. We keep
Mm,
trying to write the poems. We keep trying to capture the mood and to try
yeah.
and capture the moments. Yeah, yeah.
This is amazing,
So,
really. I love your
yeah.
answers to this question, and I particularly love your divination of poetry. Sounds very great
Yes,
to
well,
me. And to me, I love to
yes,
share this with you. I've always considered poetry as a language of the soul of the writer,
yes,
the language
yeah,
of the
yes,
soul of the poet. And as such, that's what I've held on to for a very long time. When people get to
sure.
ask me, Peter, what is poetry to you? Also, poetry is a language of the soul of the poet at that particular time the poem is
Yes,
written, you know.
yes.
And,
I think,
sometimes the language could differ in terms of the happenings around. Sometimes the language could communicate grief, it could communicate love, it could communicate
yes,
depression, it could communicate so many things. And that's why I say it's a
yes,
language
absolutely.
of the soul of the poet at that particular time when the poem is being written.
Yes, I think that is important, your phrase at a particular time, because we
Yeah,
might we might try and write a poem at this time,
yeah.
and we come out with a particular poem on a subject, but we might try and write about the same subject at another time and
Mm,
come at it from a completely different angle. So
absolutely.
yeah, yes, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. This is such a fun
Oh,
conversation, really. I
oh, you're
love the,
welcome.
the exchange of ideas and the literature
Yes,
values it's got so far.
so do I.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. You're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah.
Now, apart from the books we've mentioned thus far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on? Also, there are a lot of debate about whether plot controls characters or whether character control plot. Where do you stand on this?
Um, okay, well, thank you. Other works that I've authored, I mean, do you want me to give you the titles?
Yeah, yeah,
I've
you do that.
okay. Um, well, I've just published another poetry collection, which is called A Time for Such a Word, which is there. It's just come out last
Oh,
week, so it's quite a new publication. It's published by Black Pear Press. And my other poetry collections are God's Machynlleth and other poems. Machynlleth is a place in North Wales that's
mm,
published by Flairstack Press. Port Winston Mulberry, which is published by Little John and Bray.
mm,
Batman's Hill, South Staffs. South Staffordshire is where I grew up. That's published by Flipped Eye International.
interesting.
Come to Pass, which is published by Overstep Books. And The Girl from Mid Foxfields, published by Black Pear Press. Um,
Wow,
Early, Early and Late, which is published by Cairn Time Press. And The Stations of the Day, which is published by Black Pear Press. And
wow,
I've already mentioned Under Smoky Light, published by Offa's Press. Um,
wow.
I've published two collections of shorter fiction, which you introduced, The Portswick Imp and
Yeah.
Sing Ho, Stout Cortez. They're published by Black Pear Press. But I've also published two novels of sort of sci-fi speculative fiction, The
Mm,
Mercury Annual and Pilgrims of the White Horizon, published by Thika's Paperback Library. Now, on your question of plot and character,
yeah.
um, I find that what comes first or what seems to drive the narrative, I
Mm,
suppose, is character. Because if I've got a clear idea of
mm,
who a character is, what he or she is all about,
yeah.
then what they do, and what they become involved in seems to develop from the kind of character that they are, because the kind of character that they are, I suppose, will dictate the kind of people they have as friends, their
Mm,
relationship, their family, the
that's
kind of
true.
experiences that they are
With
involved
that.
in.
Yeah.
I suppose plot something that is the other way round, plot defining character, I suppose that would be more in the realm of, say, detective fiction, where the plot
Mm,
is very, very important. I'm not saying characters aren't important there, but in something like detective fiction or romantic fiction, it's the
mm,
plot that seems to be uh, have key importance. So the characters, if you like, are blended with the plot rather more than having a character-led narrative. So
mm,
uh, sometimes I've written things where plot drives the narrative. My speculative fiction, The Mercury Annual and Pilgrims of the White Horizon, were rather more plot led than character led in a way. So, yes, um, plot and character, very interesting question. But I have found with my fiction that character seems to be what leads the narrative.
mm.
Yes, yeah,
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 I agree with you. Even if you get to ask me which one control the other, I'll kind of choose that characters control plot because they kind of lead a narrative, like you mentioned. And that's
yes,
one of the things that stuck with me when it comes to reading novels. I love
yes,
a story's character. I love to invest myself into the characterization. I mean, take for
sure.
instance, it's a serious novel. I'll know certain characters that I experienced in book one that I'm looking forward to see how the story is continued in book two. And I'm looking forward to see what narration or what
Yes,
role they're going to play in book three and how they're
sure.
going on in
Yeah,
book. So I love characterization so much.
yeah,
Like if
sure.
there's any serious novel that I'm following, I'm more invested in the characters. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like you're watching a movie, and you're
Yes,
looking forward to see what
absolutely.
is gonna come up of this particular
Yeah,
character at this particular
yes,
time. So it's an amazing one, really.
it is. It is very much so. Very much so. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's amazing. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing. Now,
you're
could you
welcome.
tell us what publishing is like for a published author
Right.
like yourself? Are there any
Okay.
challenges you've encountered in the process of writing your books and also ever since it got published?
Um, well, yes, thank you. Well, publishing can certainly be a challenging business, and probably aspiring writers have heard this many times, but it can be very subjective. I've had the experience of having work rejected by
Mm,
one publisher, and then another publisher has taken it up quite enthusiastically. So it can be
mm,
very subjective. And even now, even though I've published a number of books, I can't and don't rely on ready acceptance from publishers. I
mm,
think, like many other worlds in the arts and elsewhere, publishing has its phases and its crazes and its fads. So,
yeah.
an aspiring writer might submit something that in itself is well worth publishing, but it simply isn't the kind of thing that publishers are looking for at the moment. I mean, I'm thinking of when the Harry Potter books became famous. Suddenly,
Mm,
everyone was trying to write like J.K. Rowling, because that was the craze of the moment. So the publishing world is very much a world of fads and phases and crazes. And I've had some bad experiences with publishing, as every other writer has. My second poetry collection, Poor Winston Mulberry, was about to be published by a particular UK publisher, but
oh,
unknown to me and unknown to a number of other poets, even as they had accepted the collection, the publisher had accepted the collection, what we didn't know was they were about to go bust. They hadn't said anything. We didn't know anything about that. And the next thing I know is they've gone out of business. So on that occasion, I had to start from scratch
Mm,
and try and find another publisher. So you never really know what's going on behind the scenes with publishers. But I would say to any aspiring writer, don't lose heart. Do keep trying. And I've got some advice a little later on, which I hope will be of use for trying to be published. Yes, yeah,
yeah, that's amazing, really. Thank you.
yes. You're
Thank you for
welcome. You're
mentioning. I
welcome.
love the sound of it. Before we
Yeah,
wrap it up for today, is there anything that you'd love to share with the viewers about your books that we did not mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know? And also, just in case you have any sort of idea or advice for struggling writers who are
sure.
looking forward to writing and publishing in different genre, or to do top people in this
Right.
category?
Yes, certainly. Well, something about my books that we haven't mentioned so far,
Yeah,
and it was related, I suppose, to my writing. For several years, I was poet in residence at the Robert Frost Poetry Festival in Key
interesting.
West, Florida, which
Beautiful.
obviously there were a lot of workshops, there were a lot of readings, a lot of different poets.
Yeah.
And it was an opportunity to exchange ideas and to exchange poems and to exchange thoughts. As we were discussing earlier, a lot of
Mm,
discussion about what poetry is and what it should do. So I very much enjoyed my time
yeah.
doing that. Um, Advice that I would have to writers who are struggling to try and be published. Um, it's a cliche, I know, but don't give up. One good avenue can be writing competitions, which are
Mm,
available in all genres. Now, you
yeah.
have to pay a submission fee, but
Yeah.
whether or not you win anything, you'll know that someone has read your work. Also, guidebooks to publishing can be very useful. In the UK, we have the Writers and Artists Yearbook, but it's available on Amazon, so anyone can get a
Access it.
copy.
Yeah.
And that lists publishers and literary agents and offers detailed guidance on how to
Mm,
prepare submissions. But one thing I will say, and of course, it's very easy to do these days, if an aspiring writer finds a publisher who looks like they will fit with them, go to their website, check them
mm,
out carefully, because some publishers might look authentic, but then it turns out that they don't do all the things that they promise they'll do. They don't
yeah.
present your book to a good standard. They don't
Absolutely.
promote it. So I would say do your homework carefully. Now, the rise of online publishing has changed things considerably. A lot
Yeah.
of online magazines and sites. But again, do your homework carefully. If you like the look of an online magazine, check out its
Mm,
website and
yeah.
make the decision from there about whether it fits with what you are writing. Um, and that also goes for competitions. Always check carefully what the competitions are all about, because some competitions have a good track record, they've got a good reputation, others
Mm,
maybe don't have a good reputation. So I would say check, do your homework and check things out carefully.
yeah.
With competitions, with publishers, and with online magazines and websites. Yeah,
Mm. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your
you're
advice, and I'm
welcome.
hoping that viewers would love to utilize it. And just in case we have some people who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a
Yes.
copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
Okay, then. Thank you. If you visit my website, that gives the titles and the publishers for my work. It's
Mm.
www.michaelwthomas, That's Michaelwthomas. It's all one word.
Mm,
www.michaelwthomas.co.uk. And you can always contact the publishers directly for copies of my books. But a lot of my titles are also available on Amazon and other distributors such as Foyles, Waterstones, Welder Books, Aid
mm.
Books. So there are several avenues through which you can follow up. And I hope people will be interested in following up my titles and seeing what my writing is all about. Thank
That's
you very
great.
much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Michael W. Thomas books directly on Amazon, on our website, and also on his website, and also on other platform. So thank you so much, Michael, for accepting the
Thank you.
invitation to be
Thank
featured
you,
on
Peter.
P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your very interesting questions and for this very detailed and fascinating discussion that we've had about the world of
Absolutely.
writing.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
love it. This was quite fun, really.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah,
And thanks to everyone who might be watching. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you.